in 18 months' time, CMOs or brand media-led agencies are going to be obsolete. I was really shocked when I moved into agency world way back when, and everything was done on a time and materials, hours basis.
I know that many agencies listening will want to do this, but won't know how to do it or where to even start. You've got to define the value exchange, not just what you're going to do.
Does a client really care? Like the lineup you've got behind it? Yeah, they want to know you've done it before, but they want a fair price for the output that they want.
The world is changing very, very rapidly. It could be quite a scary place. You have to have that innovative mindset set into your business, regardless of size.
It's a difficult time for many marketing departments. Marketers have shown time and time again, they will adapt very, very quickly. Some people will survive, and I think some won't.
So hi Leigh, and welcome to Marketing in the Madness.
Hey Katie, how you doing?
I'm super excited to have you here today because we work in quite a similar space. We've started doing a lot with Mac technologies, and I know that you are working very much in that space as well at Tangent. So
100%, yeah.
Yeah, super excited. So let's start, as I always like to do, by learning a little bit more about Leigh. Can you tell me a little bit about your career to date and I guess what you're up to nowadays?
Yeah, of course. So my career's been a bit of a mixed bag, which I think it has been for quite a lot of people, to be honest. Something I never told you, Kate, I actually did a chemistry degree, of all things.
No way.
Yeah, I'm a real nerd deep down. And then I went into kind of professional services and consulting, pretty boring, but it was really good grounding. You learn loads of different skills, worked a lot in banking and stuff like that. And then that's when I started getting my way into digital. I mean, in banking change management, there was like financial crime programs, or there was digital. It was quite easy to choose digital as opposed to the other one. It was pretty boring. And then from there, I started working with an agency that had just been bought by WPP. They were on a pretty huge growth trajectory. It was awesome. And we made a bit of a deal that as they go through their buyout into the company, myself and some other people in the business would hopefully run it in the future. Kudos to them. They stayed true to their word. And then I took over as CEO there, which was Cognified, and then became Wunderman Thompson Technology. That was kind of when the Mac technologies were kicking off, to be honest. I was quite an early proponent back in the day. I spent about 3 years running that, then spent a bit of time advising some other agencies before I popped up as the CEO of Tangent at the start of this year. And Tangent, we're an independent business. It was important to me that you could have a little go without the wider corporate structure to see if you can cut it. And yeah, it is very, very different, to be honest, but it's good fun. I'm enjoying it. And yeah, I think it's amazing to see how much has changed in the industry in the last 10 years. It's kind of unrecognizable from what I saw before.
Yeah, I mean, and Mac technologies are a huge part of that. So I want to dig into that first because not everyone listening is going to know what a Mac technology is. Do you want to go first? And I can see. I'd love you to explain what Mac technology is, and then I can pretend that I know what Mac technology is. But tell our lovely listeners what Mac technologies do, or the kind of premise of Mac.
I think, well, the premise of Mac really, without going into the acronym itself, is to be building things that are market leading, that are composable in their nature. And by that, they've got to be quite API driven in what they do. They'll be cloud first. They'll deploy integration patterns and deployment patterns that are largely headless. These are terms that have actually been around for quite a long time. I know that my old Cognified business, they did a implementation for a bank that was a microservices architecture 15 years ago, but they were done in pockets, and they were kind of seen as almost veering away from the wider product suite. Whereas really, if you want to build something that's best of breed, that uses all of the capabilities that you can have across today's landscape, it's probably the best way forward. It means you can pick the best of the best and make sure you integrate it in the right way versus having to pick a suite, which means you're going to make compromises throughout. And I think that's the core of it for me. I mean, people will take slants and takes on it, but that's what I take from it. And that's certainly with our clients, what we try and do. I think it's one of the best ways now to build something that will last for the future. You want to build products that are future ready, that are going to be here in 5 years' time, or can at least change them in 5 years' time. I think there's too much in the marketplace now where people have built something and then they're stuck. They can't move it forward. Whereas Mac for me allows you to be a lot more flexible.
Yeah, I mean, that is a fantastic explanation of Mac, a lot better than I would have done. But essentially, I mean, in terms of thinking of the benefits that it's providing the brands and the businesses that are using Mac technologies, it's also enabling them to go to market faster. Like you say, it's not in any way kind of hindering their growth because they're tied into one big platform and it can't do everything that they need it to do. So it's often faster, to get to market and to create the content or the web-based architecture that you need. Plus, it also can save quite a bit of money as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main things we've seen with quite a few of our clients where they've said, their operating costs have come down significantly using it. And I'm sure that our tech director, Andy, will be shouting at the screen, but there's a lot of things that from a technology perspective, you don't always use. And I think that what Mac does is it picks what you really need, it uses it, and you pay for that, and you don't pay for things on top of it. And as I say, I've seen quite a lot of past clients and current clients where they've had their fingers burned buying kind of a Ferrari and using 10% of its power. You want to be able to use what you pay for. And I think Mac alongside other types of things have allowed people to do that.
Yeah, well, composable, isn't it? Headless.
Yeah.
It's the ability to build your own house, really, isn't it? It's that's kind of how I look at it with our clients and the platforms that we are very lucky enough to work with on their go-to-market strategies. It's about building it in the way that you need it rather than being forced into, like you say, buying something that you might not use all of it.
100%, yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and the importance of doing that within, I guess, businesses as a whole, but particularly in the agency world. So title, potential guys for this podcast, Productize or Die.
Let's go for it. Come on, Productize or Die.
I think it's true though. So give me Leigh's view on this.
Well, I think in the agency world, I think things have changed significantly. I actually saw something from Scott Galloway the other day, and it said something like, in 18 months' time, CMOs or brand media-led agencies are going to be obsolete. And usually I look at those things and I think they were a little bit headline grabbing and kind of ignore them. But actually, I kind of agree with some bits of it. And I think that the landscape has changed such that, from a competition perspective, it's now so different than it was before. Like, if you think you've still got one budget, you've now got tech vendors going after it, going after license fees, but they also do professional services alongside it, largely some agency skills within there. You've got the consultancies who are coming from, wider transformation initiatives into this space. And then you've obviously got other agencies that are playing part of this. And then lastly, you've got those system integrators that used to do a lot of the tech implementation. They're all now fighting for the same thing, right? So that's one thing that's massively changed. And what they've got in their offerings is largely productized services. They can tell you how much something costs, the duration, you buy this off the shelf, it's templated, all these things that in agencies we kind of move away from because we like building things that are bespoke. Whereas really, like, a client wants an output. They don't want something necessarily bespoke every time. They just want something that works. So that leads me on to the second one, which is the cost model. And I think I was really shocked when I moved into agency world way back when, and everything was done on a time and materials, hours basis. And it still is pretty much. Like, I know there's a bit of changing of the guard and things are happening in a more output driven way, but it's not really happened, right? And I understand why. It's professional services, you are selling people's time, but does a client really care? Like the lineup you've got behind it? Yeah, they want to know you've done it before, but they want a fair price for the output that they want. And I think that's probably one of the most important things that we have to center back on. And then the last bit about productizing or die really is the actual things that we're creating. They now can be created in so many different ways that they couldn't in the past. They can be assisted by artificial intelligence. They can be assisted by automation. We spent, as an industry, the last 15 years sending stuff to lower wage countries to do work. Those wages are going up right now. So we've kind of cut the legs off some of the work that we've been doing. So the work that we're creating has changed in so many different ways that underlying cost of the output that we're trying to give to a client has also changed. So if you add those three things up, the overall competition, the cost models that we've got, and the outputs that we're trying to create, if you've not got a well-organized agency that's got services that I can pick and choose and understand what I'm going to get an output, you're going to be in a bit of trouble, because it's always going to be one big mess, and you're going to charge it from a day rate, and a client's going to say, I don't really care about your day rates, I care about this thing that's going to happen in 3 months' time. So that, I mean, sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there, Katie, but like, that's what I think's happening. And I think we're kind of in the midst of it right now. And yeah, the next 3 to 5 years will be interesting to see who looks different and who doesn't and who's still around.
Leigh, you are in the hot seat today, so I want you to rant. In fact, I don't want to talk that much. I want to hear you. So yeah, I'm so with you on this. I think certainly something that I've tried to do at Street, I don't even have a day rate. I mean, I know roughly what it needs to be in order for us to be a profitable business, but we don't use day rates. We try to package things up in a way, well, not try, we do. We package things up in a way that makes us easy to buy, right? So it becomes a productized offering, because if you don't do that, exactly like you say, my competitors, it's much clearer what the outputs are and what the cost is. If we try and be overly complex, one, it takes us more time, because every time you've got to quote something. Two, they don't understand what they're buying as easily, and it's this very complex, convoluted quote. So I am so with you on this needing to change. And I know that many agencies listening will want to do this, but won't know how to do it or where to even start. So what have you been doing? I'm going to be mean and ask, what have you been doing at Tangent in order to, I guess, step away from the, price per hour, price per day model to moving towards a more productized pricing options?
Okay. I mean, it'd be pretty bad if I hadn't done anything. Imagine that. Yeah, no more podcasts.
Okay, I haven't done it.
I think there's probably a first thing to set out, well, before I kind of say anything else, which is there are bits of work where you're not going to be able to give it as an output, right? So like the pure advisory stuff where you are maybe defining what the actual problem is, or defining a brief, or it's a kind of a pure thinking task, which the output might be quite nebulous. Then those things you're going to probably charge on an expertise basis. And yeah, you may charge an output might be a document, but that so there is a place for it in times. I just don't think it should be the dominant commercial model. And then, so I think for the rest of it and how you go about it, I think you need to understand firstly what your clients value in you. So one of the most important things that I've seen, even within this model actually, where an agency may say, well, we just do this time and materials type model. And the task might be a largely coding task or developing a piece of software or whatever it may be. And then the client can go through it and they might see like, well, I've got an account executive in here, I've got an account manager, an account director, I've got a client partner. That's 4 different levels of role, all doing the same discipline. None of them are coders, and I've got a software task that needs doing. So automatically, I think addressing the balance that you have behind the scenes to the task at hand is an important thing to do, because, if that's the case and you see, you've got 10 people on the project and 4 of them are within client services, then potentially you've got the wrong mix. So I think before you start anything, before you look at agency costing models and everything else, have a look at who's on it, who's doing the work, because and this is a mantra that people again who've worked with me in the past will know that I've ran the client services teams under my remit for my last 3 agencies now. And it's not that I don't value it, but that can be done by one person. That should be one senior person who understands what they're doing. Because often in those 4 levels of exec, manager, director, and partner, the person who's on it the most is actually the exec. So they actually know what's going on day to day, but they're not accountable for the decisions that are being made. So the teams, what I would always do in those teams is have a more senior person on it on a more focused point of view, so that role as being a commercial person is not spread so thin. But then in terms of actually costing things up, I think understanding what a client is willing to pay for an output. And so I'm not saying that the effort that you put in is irrelevant, but it's got to be linked to their business output or their business value that they're going to get. So if you say, we do this piece of work, the business value to you is going to be Y. For us, our fee is a percentage of Y. It's a really simple way of doing it. But I think that what a lot of agencies will struggle with is they will not be able to maybe quantify what that output's going to be for the business. You've got to spoon feed it in many ways. And I think it's a it's an important distinction between a good agency that maybe produces some nice work versus an agency that's going to be a partner, will be here for 3 years and will help you do your budgeting cycle, will help you do your return on investment back to your CFO, will help you build out your future budgeting plans. They're very, very different conversations to here's a brief, here's an output, and that's what it costs. So for me, I think your internal agency needs to be as organized as it can be, so that you can cost up things in a repeatable way, but you're using templates, tools, schema that you've used before that are known quantities, so that it's not unknown. And I think it's there's something. I'm obviously from a consulting background, so I kind of go back to this a little bit too much, perhaps. But there's certainly there's something leaves to be taken out of the consulting playbook, where they do use templates and tools that they've used before. They repurpose them, and there is an economy of scale. They don't charge necessarily the same price for all of those things. Doesn't mean it's not bespoke. Doesn't mean the output is not something that is really specific to that client. But it does mean that you're kind of getting there faster, or you're getting there quicker, or you're getting there in a more cost-efficient manner. You can't do that if everybody in your agency is billed out on a day rate.
No, and I think that's the mindset change for a lot of agency leaders, or people within agencies, is a bit like I talk about how we position businesses in their go-to-market strategies. You've got to define the value exchange, not just what you're going to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's the same rules apply. I talk to that from a go-to-market perspective in terms of your positioning, when you're trying to pull people into your marketing funnel. But same rules apply when you're trying to sell something to them at the end of the day. What value, what percentage, kickback, or what am I going to gain from this, rather than, I think what agencies have come from is responding to a brief which may have been written incorrectly. I mean, I have read many when I've been,
we all, yeah,
dealing with RFPs, and challenging that and saying, well, why are you doing this? Is that going to provide, what's the value you're trying to achieve? Because I think, clients aren't always brilliant at writing briefs. So taking that more consultative approach and really focusing in on what's the value, what do you need to change, and what is going to make your business successful and you successful in your role. This is how we're going to provide that value, rather than responding to a brief with the things that you're going to do and then costing up the time that it takes to do it. I hope it's happening a lot already, but I think has to change.
I would argue it's probably not happened as much as we might think. And the question I always find odd in even that scenario is, well, who's written the brief? Someone somewhere has written something, right? And so there is sometimes a bit too much of this is where you're going to get me going now. This is a bit too much of a reactive nature, where we just say, well, we'll wait for the brief to come in and we'll review it, and then we'll let you know how we're going to approach it. Well, someone's written that somewhere. So someone's already ahead of you in the value chain somewhere in that organization. And you need to be probably quite frank with your position as an agency within that organization to know that then you're not as well positioned as you might be, because someone's feeding you some work at some point, and it's probably written by, if not someone external, another agency, a consultant, or whatever it may be. And I think one thing I would say about, being a bit mean about some agencies here, like, they are pretty good at thinking on their feet and crafting, like, learning new skills. I think they're probably one of the best industries at that, right? Like, they'll take something that's been in the press for a week and it looks like it's been in their decks for the last 2 years. Like, they're unbelievable at that. And in the past, if we go to think about when search and online advertising all changed, right? We went from agencies making fairly large fees through the lack of transparency in that kind of auction and the pay-per-click. And then so what they did at that point is, well, there was two things you can do. You can either just accept it and we're going to make less money and probably cut our headcount off the back of it. Or what they all did is they moved upstream and said, well, we'll try and solve the customer problem, get involved more in creative, do the strategy. We're going to make less money down the line because it's more transparent. But they solved it, right? And I have no reason to believe that they won't do it again. But I think we are at that moment, particularly with how much is being automated, how much clients are asking for. I mean, every client right now is pretty much under pressure economically. They are, interest rates through the roof. So if any client has any debt, they'll probably pay more to stand still than they were before. And it's a difficult time for many marketing departments. They're the first ones that get the cut. Technology is often not too far afterwards, not going to make some new investments. So people are going to struggle, and they're going to ask even more questions around things that can't be defined. So it's a grim reality of where we are. But, marketers have shown time and time again, they will adapt very, very quickly. And some people will survive, and I think some won't.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that. It's I see it coming through already. The impact on my clients, it's although we're quite well positioned because we help them go to market and attract the next round of clients.
More from you.
Yeah, they do. I feel like I'm in a good place. Well, as long as I do a good job, but we can see that that's happening. And I do think one of the biggest things that can help us, and something that I'm doing as a business, is investing in the right technologies, because if others aren't, and they're not looking at the things that are going to help them do their job quicker, faster, more economically, then that's where I think that there is a big opportunity for businesses to change. On technologies,
go on then.
So we're talking about quoting, and how I guess you become you get to a place where you're helping form the brief. I will talk about that in a minute as well. Okay. But when you're specifically talking about quoting, productizing the quote slightly, are there any tools, and it doesn't matter if there isn't, you can just say no, but are there any tools, because I have interviewed people on the podcast before, and there are some quite interesting tools out there that help you quote. Have you used any of those, or are you doing it more or how are you doing it, I guess?
Yeah, I think the best way to go about it is, create I don't think a lot of what we do is, I'm going to contradict myself a bit here, but it is quite bespoke, but made up of parts that we should know. So it's more a case of defining what your true service catalog you can have across an entire business may be, even to the point of you should be able to say if you're a web builder, you should be able to say, well, a component with this business logic that has this many back-end integrations that is going to feature on this many, you should be able to know what that costs on a certain technology. And then building a quote for a site becomes almost like a shopping list, right? You're just kind of clicking, selecting. Then you'll need some curation from a commercial person and a project person to make sure it actually fits into some kind of coherent plan. But that's fairly automated, right? You could do that really quickly once you're up and running. The thing that I think you should be using some automation for is to help understand those briefs, so you can get there's technologies out there that can help you scan them. We generally try and build some of our own stuff for that kind of. It's such important IP for us. You want to keep some of that in-house, really. And then we've got forecasting tools and stuff that we'll use as part of it. Our tool actually for forecasting is a tool called Forecast, and it is a pretty small startup. They've been pretty useful, and from what I've seen, they do, awesome project projections, commerciality within it all. They've got percentages where you can and can't go. It's pretty smart actually, but generally we'll try and build some of that functionality ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to say there's some great tools out there. So I actually know a couple of founders of platforms like this that do slightly different things, but Futurely, which is more around your profitability as an agency, which has some of those elements, I guess, integrated into the platform. But then also another one, which a friend of mine owns, called Scope, which helps quote projects. I haven't used it, so I can't talk about it with a huge amount of authenticity because I haven't used it. But I do know the premise of it is enabling you to quote on value rather than quoting on T&M, which I think is it has to be the future. Like you say, otherwise, technology, AI will overtake and we won't be needed anymore. It could be quite a scary place for us if we don't keep up and really, I guess, prove and show the value. I think we've got to sell based on value nowadays, not just on the time it takes to do a job.
Absolutely right. And that piece on AI is, there's not a podcast these days without someone talking about AI. But, if we try to learn some of the lessons from the past of sending a load of stuff offshore and then trying to now wrestle some of that control back from an AI perspective, you got to think very carefully about, again, the value you provide to a client, and are you eroding that by using AI? So where is it truly assistive and where is it actually contradicting what you're doing? And actually saw this, I was advising a client last year where they have a fully kind of FTE pay by resource type model. But in the race to try and seem and remain relevant with a client, they were developing all sorts of AI tools that would do the same stuff that the people they were billing the client for. Now, kind of happy days for the client, I guess, really, because they're probably going to get something a bit cheaper. But they did that before they developed the commercial model of how they were going to then either pay that by a license or whatever it may be, so everyone's happy. So all they were doing was losing their own headcount whilst automating some parts of the process. And I kind of, well, I applaud the endeavor of trying to push things forward. However, that's just completely knackered your business model before you've had a chance to, and that's where productized thinking works through, right? You develop a concept, you build it out into your client or the challenge that you're trying to solve. It has a long-term roadmap that you then see how you're going to make money. It's going to be profitable, as opposed to just, here's a shiny idea, let's go implement it, and it's cut the bottom out of some of our profits.
Super interesting, though. I've seen agencies. In fact, I had Andy Lambert from Content Cow talking at the event I did last week, and he was saying, he started his business as an agency, a content agency that developed social media content for clients, and then off the back of that, created a content calendar that helped them plan and push the content out and automate some of the more manual jobs that the agency was doing, and ended up productizing his own business to become Content Cow, which was a content calendar, which has now just been acquired by Adobe. So
there you go, productize or die.
Yeah, exactly. You can it is interesting because I do think, the world is changing very, very rapidly. And I've seen other businesses, I'm not sure that I know that much about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Another friend of mine, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but he had am I allowed to name them? I'm going to. A business called Inflow. It was a really clever piece of technology. I love technology. I'm always looking at new tech for Street. So this one was kind of like an SEO tool. You could put in who your customers were, your basically identify your prospects and the personas of the people that you want to target, whichever industry, what their job titles are, the subjects that you know are keeping them up at night, and plug that all in, and it would come back to you with a content plan and the content pillars that you need to write about.
Oh, really?
You could write an article and then plug it in, and it would refine it so it's more SEO friendly. I think probably ChatGPT has had a big part in that business not existing anymore. But what it goes to show is you've got to keep, the world is changing so quickly. We all have to stay 1, 2, 3 steps ahead. We've all got to be looking at the other technologies that are out there. And the same, we were talking about Mac earlier, these big, they're referred to as monoliths, are potentially going to die if they don't keep up with the newer, more flexible technologies. Same in finance. The big banks aren't even talking to, millennials particularly well, but definitely not Gen Z and Gen Alpha. If they don't change their products and the way that they manage their bank, then the more flexible Revoluts, Monzos of the world are going to take over, and they will die. And that is the same there's so many different examples that I can give here, but that it just shows technology is changing the world that we all live in. If we don't change and we don't keep up and we don't if we keep doing things the way they were done 10, 15, even 5 years ago, then your business is going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah, and I think banking and technologies are really a couple of really good examples where still a lot of the main players are the main players that were a few years ago, because I think they've had such an influx of money over the last, banking, I guess, for quite a lot of years. It's quite hard to break into it. It is a monopoly that's so difficult. And I'm kind of surprised that there's not been more of a breakup of it, if I'm really honest. But there is more money going into those. I mean, I don't feel sorry for them in any way if they get left behind, because they've not innovated at the pace that the people maybe should have done. But I do think that it is remarkably hard to get into some of those things. I think that, you see, we were talking about an acquisition into Adobe, right? How many businesses have they acquired in the last however many years? Microsoft buying everything that they bought. It's a difficult thing, but there's obviously not a monopoly yet, because there's so many people involved. But it does feel that you need a certain amount of revenue to get to a certain point that you're even going to be taken seriously in those things.
Yeah, totally. I think it's an exciting but scary place to be at the moment, because if you don't take the right steps, you don't keep an eye on what's going on out there, then yeah.
Yeah, and every business needs to have that built into their general operating model, right? They should have part of their budget that should be reviewing new tech, new innovation. If you're not, you're going to fall back on a digital maturity perspective anyway. But people don't actually do it. They go from project to project to project to project, and you're never kind of out of that constant build or next thing mode. When is looking at innovative stuff business as usual? It's not really, and it should be. It's crazy that when we've been working in this world for this long and it's not, and it's still like, that thing's new, we need to go implement it, right? Everyone start a new project, stop what you're doing. How is that still the case? But it is.
Yeah, well, that's where smaller businesses, I do think, sometimes have that mentality to be able to change more quickly, because there aren't the layers to jump through.
Yeah.
So for me, for instance, we were talking before we went live about email, weren't we? And I was saying, we've traditionally led most of our campaigns through email technologies and using email marketing automation tools. But the email, oh my gosh, I'm going to be talking about this wrong. But anyway, the email people, the email host, like the email providers are spotting spam more easily. So you can't run email campaigns at scale in the way that you used to. So there are ways around it, but you have to keep an eye on those kind of things, because otherwise
pesky email people.
Pesky email people. But there's, I think the world is changing. I think, yes, email marketing is still going to exist, but social media probably is going to be a much larger share of the go-to-market strategy for all kinds of businesses than potentially email was. We're already seeing things like, in the B2C world, SMS, how many times now do you ask to sign up with your mobile number as well as your email to get that lovely discount code when you're, signing up to a new fashion website, which is what I tend to do most of the time. So the world is changing. There are new technologies out there. There's going to be new ways of engaging with us. Yeah. We have to, I find it really exciting. It is slightly overwhelming. And whether you're in B2B, B2C, whatever you might be, there's so much change happening. I think you have to have that innovative mindset set into your business, regardless of size. And you have to have the ability to change quite quickly. And it's interesting, even the bigger banks, another good friend of mine, she was head of digital or marketing and innovation at NatWest, and was, I guess, in charge of the kind of smaller startup banks that they brought to help them move more quickly and not be too much of a big heritage. And she's got some super interesting stories, but that enabled that kind of breakout innovation part of the business, enabled NatWest to compete in a space that they may not have been able to compete with if they'd just done it the same way that they always had done in the bigger part of the historic bank. So I think, whether you're a small business or a big business or, a huge, international.
You've got to do it, right? And it's got to be, it's got to be part of the culture. At Tangent, we did a product palooza, we called it.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, it had a Mexican wrestling theme. It was awesome. And it was a hackathon. So everyone in the company, I was in a team as well, not getting me out of a team. We didn't win, even though I tried to influence the judges. But we made business cards, but that was about it. But everyone had a prototype by the end of the day. They demoed it, and then obviously we went out and everything else. But it was, the whole company stopped for a day. And obviously that's quite a big investment for us as a company. But it's so important for us to do that, to spend time together on the general topic was generative AI, which everyone's was, I think, at the time. But unless you do stuff like that on a regular basis, then you can't just say you're innovative, right? You've got to try to learn new stuff together, and it can't be one person in the business. It's got to be everybody in the business that tries to do it. But it is something that you have to really pause and stop and make sure you focus on. Otherwise, it'll just get swept under the carpet, and you'll be irrelevant before you know it.
Be proactively innovative. I think that's it. It's so true, though. Again, it's smaller agencies that I've worked at, around about 100 staff. that, we've had an agency that I used to work for had an innovation department, and they used to challenge the whole agency to do different things, hackathons. We created a polling app, and we used to use that in our pitches to show, look, we're at the forefront of technology. We're creating our own productized offerings that are helping businesses, which we then used in our sales marketing tactics. So I think not only is it a great cultural thing, but it will also help you with your go-to-market strategies, especially if you're in B2B, because it proves to the businesses that you're trying to sell to that you do what you say on the tin.
You do what you say,
yeah, which is important. Now, I want to go back. We don't have long left, but in my final few minutes with you, to talk about Mac technologies and some of the amazing things that you're seeing, I guess, happen in the technologies and the strategies that you're putting together for your clients, because this podcast is all about the marketing innovations. And I sometimes feel that we don't talk about technology enough. We should do. Like, obviously, we're all aware AI is here and it's here to stay. But are there any products, services, things that you guys have deployed recently for a client that you think are really clever? And can you tell me a little bit about the technologies that helped you get there?
Yeah,
I'm putting you on the spot there because I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that, but I'm super interested.
Yeah, and I think the use of AI in particular across all of our different business units has taken very different flavors. So actually, as part of that hackathon, we created it's called Tangent Genie, and it was out of our finance and HR team, so that they made a kind of a chatbot version of our handbook. So you could go and ask how many days holiday I've got. Instead of like looking it up, it will tell you back what you've got from your own company's record, integrated with Bamboo HR. Awesome, right? So it's just like, and it's a Slack. So you just open a new Slack channel and ask them what you wanted to do. So I thought that was quite interesting, the fact that it was not a customer facing thing, and that is something that we're using across our business. I think some of the best ones I've seen are in and around, everybody's using things like, Mid-Journey for developing out new concepts, but I think prototyping is one of the best bits I've seen. So the initial prototype may get developed through a design team, but you can spin that out into 10 really, really quickly. And so that when you're having a conversation with a client about what you like, what you don't like, you've gone from 1 to 10, and then you can rationalize that back down really quickly. So that's where you'd think it would be more technical a lot of the time. I think that's a really good design tweak that we've been doing. And we're very clear with clients of how we've done it. Like, the initial idea is from your requirements and our first take on it, and then we've kind of exploded it out really quickly for us to then draw it back down together. I think some of the applications within technology have been around for a while, in and around QA in particular. How we do automated testing is always going to be important. I still think that at a code level, we struggle with the legalities of, most things we develop, the customer will own the IP. But if it's in develop, there still isn't the legal framework to understand who owns that code. So I think, you can come to ChatGPT in particular for some initial principles around coding or some architecture reviews. But after a while, you've got to develop something yourself. Otherwise, it's not going to necessarily be, you don't know who owns it at the end of it, right? And I think that we've got to keep looking at all these different things of what we will do with clients. But I think the thing that we've got to be very, very careful of, and we continue to do, is to differentiate the machine-based outputs from the human-based outputs. And obviously, a lot of the time, it's a mixture of both. But make sure that when something is, because what we found is, you can do things quicker, you can do things generally a little bit more cost effectively, and actually to a higher quality if you're assisted by AI in some way. And that's across pretty much every department. It's pretty consistent. But there are common mistakes that it always gets wrong. The tonality is often the same if you use AI. So you get this, I don't know what it is, like maybe it's like the equivalent of MSG in some kind of fast food. It's like you get the same undercurrent somewhere. And
you can see it.
You see it,
yeah, I can see it on LinkedIn, especially when people are writing their posts using ChatGPT, or there's lots of tools out there now that will auto generate responses and comment on posts.
Oh, they're the worst.
And it's so bloody obvious.
Yeah. When I say things though, that is why humans are needed, right? Because I see that and I'm immediately, you've just lost everything.
You've put me off, right?
So I won't go near them anymore because I'm just like, well,
But you can use it cleverly.
Yeah.
Cleverly. We've just started using a really cool new platform.
And we've just started using a new word as well, cleverly.
Cleverly, which sits across various different social medias and also email, actually. But we're particularly using it on LinkedIn, and it's called Meet Alfred.
Okay.
I have their founder and CEO coming on soon, and it does. You have to write the content.
Okay.
But it will then start to engage with your prospects using the content that you have written. So it's from you, but it just helps you do things at scale.
Yeah.
So that might be send current connection requests or like and comment on specific, you can put the URL in from a group or from a post of your competitor and connect with all the people that are liking or engaging with that. So it does some really clever things, but it's, to my mind, it's human first, and then if they don't engage, they don't engage. But it's enabling us to get reach at scale, but with a human-led approach. It does lots of other clever things. That's coming soon on the podcast, I promise.
That's a really good example, right, of how it works. And I think I think you've defined like what the problem we're going to have in the future. I think longer term, the benefits of artificial intelligence will actually create more jobs, and will create more because there'll be more ability for humans to think as opposed to just doing stuff. There'll be less manual bits and pieces, and there'll be more ideas that will come out of that. But I think in the short term, there's going to be some real pain of, I don't need that anymore, I could do this. And unless we go and retrain, re-enable, re-skill people, redefine new jobs, we're going to come to some talent crisis at some point in the future where we've got rid of a load of people to do stuff, we haven't retrained them. It actually reminds me, I wasn't alive at the time, but of the miners' strikes. People moved. I was originally born in a mining town in Yorkshire, and people had whole communities there. They were all surrounded by the mine. They were all, the hooter would go off in the towns where people would know to walk to work. And then when the government decided they were pivoting away from mining, right, they didn't replace skills in those communities. And I think that's a lesson that we kind of all need to learn, is the fact that, and they're behind on many of the different things that you measure within social class and social community. So I don't think it's a company thing that Tangent needs to do. I don't think it's an industry thing that marketing and advertising need to do. It's like a societal and governmental thing that we need to be aware of, that short-term pain we're going to go through, help do retraining, redesigning, and re-enabling the workforce, because you don't want to do that again. Like that, it's awful, and people are still rebuilding back from it 40 odd years later.
Yeah, I saw a program. I can't remember which town, village it was, but I saw a program about it. And like you say, the whole town was built around, that industry and things working in a certain way. And then it changed, and there's hundreds, thousands of people left without jobs and not being able to provide for their families. So I think we are at a similar, if not a bigger societal change.
People, yeah.
Because technology is changing everything. So keep your eye on technology, guys. It is here. It's, there's a really good book by Mo Gaudet, which I haven't actually finished yet, but called Scary Smart, which talks about if we don't, how we behave is going to influence. This is a whole other subject. I need to get him on the podcast. But it's a whole, the whole premise of the book is around how AI, we are informing the AI. If we inform it in the wrong way, it will take over and do bad rather than good. So anyway, I won't go too much into that. That is a different podcast. Now, my very last question for you, Leigh, and I ask all my guests this, and I never tell them I'm going to, because I like to really surprise and shock you, is if you were to recommend having someone on the podcast, and I feel like we've talked about technology, so it should be someone techie, who would you recommend for me to interview?
Someone techie?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be techie, but someone that you'd be interested in, or that or that you think would give me some fantastic revelations around, the innovations in marketing. And let's be honest, technology is the hugest part of that.
Yeah, you did surprise me with that.
Yeah, that's right. You can have a bit of thinking time.
Someone that immediately comes to mind, so I'll maybe just go with them. It used to be the CTO of Cognified, and then at Wunderman Thompson, and I think now He's just gone to Omnicom.
Okay.
I think I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah.
I've said it now. So
We've said it. We can cut it if we need to.
She's called Leigh Gammons.
Okay.
And he's massively into the Mac world, but he just eats his stuff for breakfast. Every time I talk to him, I learn something new. And yeah, I think he would have some interesting points to have. So do you want me to ask him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
Cool. Yeah.
Introduce me to one of my next guests. That would be really handy. Thank you.
No worries.
And I promise I'll ask the questions that you want me to ask him as well.
Definitely.
Leigh, thank you so much. You've really made me think. I'm like going, going to get back and research even more technologies.
Thank you.
Make sure that we're positioned in the right way. So I hope if that's made me think, that it's helped our lovely listeners think as well. So a big thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Katie.